Welcome to INN CEO Talks. Joining me today is Dr. Rami Batal, the CEO of Universal Ibogaine, which trades on the TSX Venture under the symbol IBO. Dr. Batal is a seasoned biopharmaceutical industry executive and a healthcare professional who has a passion for and an expertise along with experience in neuropsychiatry and mental health and behavioral health illnesses, which include substance use disorders. Ibogaine is a powerful medicine that must be administered in a supervised medical setting following rigorous screening and validation. The safety protocol developed at Universal Ibogaine's Research Partners Clinic, which is Clear Sky Recovery Solutions, has helped thousands of patients with 0 fatalities. When administered in a clinical setting with professionals trained in the company's protocols, Ibogaine can be a safe, fast, and relatively pain-free method of opioid detox. Ibogaine has also shown promise in the interruption of other addictions, both substance and behavioral related. Ibogaine appears to repair damaged brain tissues, and its effects last long enough for a patient to begin to recover and rebuild their lives. Joining me now is Dr. Rami Batal. Dr. Batal, thank you for joining me. These are
Pleasure.
pretty big claims, and we see so much of a movement towards this kind of recovery for people who are dealing with addiction.
Indeed, Stuart. Thanks again for having me on the show. Big or small, let me start with this. Whether they are big claims or small claims, we are very confident that they will move the needle from where we're at right now, because the situation in terms of addiction management, inclusive, of course, of the infamous, now notorious opioid use disorder, the situation is not satisfactory by any measure. We are looking at relapse rates of 90% within a year from treatment. So any movement in the right direction, considerable evidence-based, is going to be transformative in this field. And we do believe that Ibogaine will be playing a big role in this regard.
So how does it work? How does it have an impact or an effect on the brain?
Excellent. One of the first lessons that I learned in neuropsychiatry and central nervous system disorders as a whole is that the best kind of medicines are very, very complex. They are promiscuous. They have multiple partners, multiple receptors, multiple mechanisms of action, and it takes us a lot of time to figure out exactly how they work on these receptors. Ibogaine is one of those. It hits multiple receptors in multiple sites of the brain. One of them, in part, is the mu receptor for opioids. So you sort of conclude that there's a mechanism whereby it is disallowing those opioids latching on where they're going, but at the same time, they're not causing the withdrawal because they're partial. It is a partial agonist of that particular receptor. But it also goes beyond that. It hits other receptors, including, of course, ones implicated in the reward mechanism in our brain, dopamine, and others. What's also interesting about Ibogaine, because you referred to some repair of tissue or cells, it stimulates the production of something called glial cell-derived neurotrophic factor. It's essentially the elixir for growth of neurons, for nervous cells, nerve cells. And this is important because it explains, at least in part, the effect that Ibogaine has in bringing the brain back, rewiring it, bringing it back to a pre-addictive state, which is very exciting because not only does it give us the window of protection that Ibogaine does in terms of no craving, in terms of the decoupling from addiction, but it allows the brain also to receive other treatments that have been hard to incorporate in the past after treatment. So you would see a role for psychotherapy and other modalities as well.
So is this where psychotherapy then plays an important role in working with Ibogaine? Because one of my understandings about addiction is it's not just the substance and the way that, as you pointed out, those receptors are demanding that they get satisfied, but there's also neural pathways that are, invoking particular responses to stimulus, and that's what makes you want to go there. Are you having to, I guess through Ibogaine, address both of these issues? One's the physical and one is the behavioral response to stimuli.
Indeed, indeed. And had Dr. Sola, our co-founder, been here with us on this call, I will borrow his language. Ibogaine, at the end of the day, as powerful as it is not a magic bullet. Addiction is complex, and it is a chronic illness. I keep coming back to an example of diabetes being a complex illness, and it is also chronic. We have to come at it with several modalities at the same time. Some of them will be pharmacology, so there could be even opportunities to introduce other pharmacology modalities to help ibogaine, but there will have to be a role for psychotherapy as well, and we have to stay on the patient for a period of time. Now, I do not mean that we're going to be administering ibogaine to the patient for a long time. You highlighted correctly that it's a short period of time, but we have to continue with other modalities for a period of time, month, through a year, to make sure that this relapse that we're seeing is not happening, that we're improving the outcomes.
So for somebody who's watching right now saying, okay, I want to know how this, is going to function, both as maybe I have an interest in it, but two, as an investor, how will you roll out this treatment? Are you going to be doing it in a series of clinics? And if so, then what's your plan?
Perfect. So the first things first, we stand on shoulders of giants. There's been some work done in regard to ibogaine in jurisdictions where it was permissible, including what has taken place and continues to take place in the Cancun Clear Sky Recovery Solutions Clinic, our research partner. But in order for us to be able to introduce this effectively here in Canada, we have to go through clinical trial process. Health Canada would want us to prove the claims of safety. Primarily, you mentioned it's a serious medicine that needs to be supervised medically, and also, of course, efficacy. It's really important for us to show that in our hands, in our clinical trial design. Once we're beyond this particular stage, as important as it is, and as confident as we are because of the history of utilization of ibogaine, then we could be in a position to roll it out in clinics. There will be rigorous screening, as you have highlighted, looking for the right patient, but also in particular trying to avoid some of the adverse events that could play out because of the impact of ibogaine on the heart. In particular, we have to make sure that the patients are right. And then there's going to be the actual medical detoxification. We have to stabilize the patient on the drug, and then medical detoxification using ibogaine, short period of time. We monitor them for a few days, and then additional work needs to happen, but it will not be in that acute setting. They'll go out, maybe they are in a rehabilitation setup, maybe they are in an sober living setup. We're with them, we are counseling, there's psychotherapy modalities, as you have highlighted, and we stay with them for a period of time. So it's a complete system solution. From an investor standpoint, you look at it and say, okay, so it's not about the acute treatment, which any pharmaceutical company increasingly dislikes, unfortunately. It's about more of a chronic management, several solutions, and those several solutions by themselves would be value added based on this central modality of ibogaine administration.
So in the arc of that development, where are you at right at this point? Do you classify yourself as a drug development platform with the long-term plan that you've just laid out?
Yes, indeed. There is more to the story as well, Stuart, and I'll come to that in a moment. Yes, we are a drug development platform, as you correctly highlighted, and it is part of a larger setup or modality, clinical treatment that we're planning to roll out, focusing on addiction. Now, as we are developing the drug here in Canada, as confident as we are, looking forward now to putting on clinical trial application in front of Health Canada, going into the large trial, we are building that system in and around ibogaine without ibogaine. Let's call it the pre-ibogaine system. So as you possibly know, we have acquired, as part of our sort of qualifying transaction when we went on the TSX, we acquired a clinic in Manitoba, the central location of North America and very central to Canada. This clinic has a rehabilitation facility in it. We will start building around that rehabilitation facility to make sure we're ready for medical detoxification with whatever tools are available to us today. We're going to innovate, and we're going to build up the additional modules in that system that you and I have been talking about. And when ibogaine is ready, we're going to insert it into that system. But even pre-ibogaine, we have innovative ideas about how we can move the needle on the treatment of addiction until we have ibogaine authorized.
Let's just talk a little bit about the size of that market, because I think that it's important for anybody who's considering investment to understand that the opioid addiction and other substance-related addiction issues are massive in our society and continue to grow.
It's unfortunately a factual statement. In this particular situation, I'm a bit shy from using dollars and cents. I would rather look at it from the perspective of prevalence of an illness, being addiction in this particular case. The numbers indicate that 1 out of every 5 Canadians suffers from some engagement with addiction throughout their lives. We know that in terms of overdoses, every few hours we have a death here in Canada. The numbers are, I'm looking even at the US metric, has surpassed 100,000 over the past year. So we're talking about a serious condition that is feeding on many. The larger sphere that encompasses addiction or is intertwined with it, which is mental health, of course, is established as 20% of the population throughout their lives. So they're with it, on it, 20% of our population. So we're talking about large spheres in terms of patients affected, and solutions that would be effective will find a way to make sure that there's value created for those that have invested in the vehicles that develop these solutions.
So for investors right now who are looking at you, they're saying, okay, tell us about your recent financing.
We have closed a private placement of $6 million Canadian. This placement, we feel at this valuation level for us, is going to be sufficient to allow us to, first of all, take care of the proceeds, which we've done now, of the acquisition of clinic number 1. It will allow us also to optimize, and we talked a bit in code about the ambition that we have to develop a new innovative addiction treatment model, even pre-Ibogaine. So Kelburn is going to be our laboratory for the development of such a model that we could roll out then into other acquired clinics, or ultimately even start franchising out as a model that is to be inserted into general healthcare facilities that would be willing to take it and take on our stringent training and our controls, or even mental health clinics and what have you. So there's that bit. And then, of course, the lion's share of the proceeds is going to be invested in going forward with that clinical development program that will ultimately lead to a position on Ibogaine that would convince Health Canada that there's a path there toward medicalization and commercialization.
So, final question for you right now, because it's one that all investors who watch this program are asking. Why now? Why should I get involved with a universal Ibogaine at this time?
I think we are at a point whereby we are pre-transformative growth. And I hope that this is not a cliche for our cynical and skeptical and savvy investors. But if you look at where we sit at the nexus of several interesting hot environments or markets. The idea of introducing these psychoactives we call psychedelics into mental health general as a sphere. The idea of working on addiction as a disease area that is unfortunately expanding and exploding in terms of number of patients. Our ability to be in both drug development, because Ibogaine is a starting point for us, as central as it is. There is Ibogaine 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 in our minds as we start modulating the medicine, creating a variety. But there are other medicines for addiction also that we're interested in including in our arsenal. And that also speaks to some of the psychedelics out there that can deal with some of the comorbidities. We also look at our ability to be health care providers, because we are dealing with addiction, pre-Ibogaine, with Ibogaine, and through Ibogaine. I think it's a very robust, well-diversified play that combines different areas of increasing interest and increasing growth. And I invite everybody to look at us in that light and support us on that interesting journey.
You're going to have a very interesting journey ahead of you here over the next few months and more than a year. I hope you'll come back from time to time and give us updates on how it's going.
I appreciate you having me for the first time and going forward, and I enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for the channel.
Great. Look forward to seeing you in the future.